Hello, everybody, and welcome. In this video, we are going to begin wrapping up our visual scripting platformer. And in this section, I'm going to be covering the pause menu. So this is a relatively simple system to set up, especially compared to the projectile and the enemy that we've already developed. So without further ado, I will start sharing my screen and we will jump into this. So I have my platformer from last time when we were working. To set up my pause menu, the first thing I'm going to do is open up my HUD scene. So I have my scenes down here in my project panel. I'll just double click on my HUD. And what I'm going to do is drop down this HUD in my hierarchy, and I'm going to go to my pause menu. I'm going to hit move my cursor over to the screen view and hit F so I can focus in and see my pause menu. Now remember, in an earlier video, we actually toggled this off. We turned off the visibility of this panel. So what we need to do with my pause menu selected in the hierarchy, I need to go up to the inspector, and at the very top, I'll see the title and I'll see this little box that just makes it active or inactive. So I'm going to check that box. And there we go. Now I can see my pause menu. So I'm going to go back over to my cursor, go into my scene view, hit F again and F one more time and try and get a good view. There we go. So now I can see my pause menu. Perfect. So now what I'm going to want to do here is actually I'm going to create a script that handles turning on and turning off the pause menu using the escape button. Now, I'm not actually going to add a script to my pause menu. I'm going to add a script to my HUD menu. And so if I click on HUD up here, I'm going to scroll down into my inspector and I'm going to go to add component. And we're just going to add a script machine. Or actually, I apologize. We're going to add a state machine. So I'm going to get rid of this script graph. So I'm just going to select these little 3 dots right here in the top right corner of this component. I'm going to remove component, and there we go. So it should be removed. Now I still have this variables tab. I can delete that as well the same way. So hit these 3 dots and remove component. So note that whenever I create a script machine or a state machine, it's going to create that variables component as well. So I'm going to go to add component, and again, I'm going to make a state machine. Okay. And with the state machine, we're actually not going to create a new graph. We're just going to embed this graph. So we're not going to create a new macro, but we'll create a graph. So I'm going to choose embed for my source, and I'm going to hit edit graph. So you'll see, just like our state machine for our player and our enemy, we start with a start node. Now I'm going to click on this, and I'm actually going to change this to playing. So I'm just going to go over here, my graph inspector, and type in playing. So we're going to have a state for playing, so when the game is being played. And then we're going to have another state for when the game is paused. So I'm just going to right-click and create a new script state. And you'll see it looks pretty similar to our playing state. I'm going to click in here and go up to my graph inspector again, and I'm going to call this paused. Okay, so now, similar to our player states, we're going to add transitions here. So I'm going to right-click on playing, make a transition and connect it to paused. And then we'll do the same thing from paused to playing. So now I have 2 transitions. These should be working. Now, whenever we pause our game, we want our time variable, our time scale to be set to 0. So what that effectively does is it says, all right, whenever we pause our game is going to stop. Our time scale, like multiplier, is going to be 0, and our game and any kind of actions in it are going to be completely frozen. So I'm going to open up my pause state, and I can get rid of the on update and on exit state and just use on enter. So for on enter, and this is going to be really easy, all we're going to do is set time scale. We'll leave this at 0. And then from here, we will look for a game object, and we will set active. And this game object is going to be our pause menu. And the value is going to be checked, so we're going to be activating it. Now from here, what I can do is I can go here and look up a transform and try and find my object. Or what's easier, Since remember, this state machine is attached to our HUD object. This isn't our actual pause menu object. So we need to identify the object that we want to set active or inactive whenever this state is entered. So from here, I can hit this little dot, and you'll see that I have several options, right? So if I just type in pause, and I can find my pause menu, and it's looking for objects in this game scene, so all the objects in here. And I select pause menu, and now I have my pause menu set to be the game object that is turned on whenever we enter the paused state. Now I can go back, and now we can set up our playing state. Now, if you'll notice in the pause state, we only have the on enter state. Remember, we deleted the on exit and on update. So we're going to do something similar with playing. I'm going to open up playing. I'm going to delete these two nodes, so on update and on exit state. I'm going to keep my on enter state, and I'm going to tag this to set time scale again. This time, I'm going to make our time scale 1. So this means that time will be moving normally. Now, if I made this to 2, time would be moving twice as fast. So this is, again, a scale or a multiplier that we use to determine how fast time is in our game. Okay, so for our next node, we're going to do the same thing. Game object set active. And in this case, we're going to leave the value as null or unchecked. And I'm going to again look for my pause menu. So I click this little circle or little bullseye icon. I type in pause. I look for the pause menu. And there we go. So what our play state is doing, which is the state that we're in now, whenever we enter the play state, our time scale is set to 1, so our player can move around and interact with the game space. Our enemies can move and our animations can happen. And our pause menu then turns off, essentially turning off this visibility, which is what we've done here with this kind of icon. Now I'm in the HUD right now. So if I check this, I'm going to be turning off everything, right? This is effectively checking or unchecking this box for our pause menu in both of these states. That's pretty straightforward. Now, what we need to do is set up our transitions. So for going from playing to paused, we want to use a button press. And for that button press, we're going to use the escape button. That's typically standard for most computer games. Escape is going to be your kind of like main menu or your start button or your pause menu. So I'm going to open up this transition. Note that this is the transition from playing to paused because these transitions are going to be different. I'm going to open this up. And notice how we have this state trigger transition. And this is the only thing that we have in here. So all I'm going to do is right click. I'm going to type in on keyboard input. And I'm just going to link this to my trigger transition. Now, right now, this is set, my key is set to space and my action is set to down. I'm going to keep the action to down. This action corresponds to how the key is pressed. So when it's pressed down, or when the key is held, or when the key is let up. And so when it goes up. So if I toggle down, we have hold, down, and up. I'm going to keep it on down. And for my key, I'm going to toggle this down, and I'm actually going to choose escape. Now, conveniently enough, escape is right above space. So I'll just go up here and hit escape. And we should be good for our transition from play to paused. Now, again, I'm going to back out. And we'll see that I have this little like keyboard icon for my transition here. So next, I'm going to go for my transition from paused to playing. And we'll open this up. You'll see that I have a similar transition as starting. Now, I'm going to do a similar input. I do want, so I'm going to do on keyboard input. And I'm going to attach this over to my trigger transition. So whenever, and I'm going to choose escape again. So if I hit escape the first time, I will enter my pause menu. My game will freeze. And then if I hit escape again, my pause menu will leave and my speed will, or my time scale will continue as normal. Now, I also have a button in here. So if you look at my pause menu in the scene view, we see we have this resume button. So we also want to use that to trigger this transition and go back to play mode. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a second node that sends us to our trigger transition. I'm going to right click in this node or add node, and this node is going to be called on button click. Okay, looks just like this. So, and I can link this over to my trigger transition. Now, right now, this on button click is set to this. Now, that's not what we want because, again, this is our whole entire HUD menu, and that's not really a button. So what we're going to do is just like we did with our looking for our pause menu and turning it active or inactive, I'm going to click on this little bullseye, and I'm going to type in resume, and I'll see that I have my resume button. Again, this is pulling assets that are already in the hierarchy in my scene. So I'm going to hit that resume button. And now if I click on this button, it will open it up in the hierarchy. So I'm seeing that this is my resume button. If I click on my resume button, I see it highlighted in my scene view, and that is exactly what I want to use. So this transition is good. So I'll go back to my HUD scene, and I believe this HUD scene is looking pretty good too. Now, there's two more buttons that we have in our pause menu here. We have a menu and a quit button. If I click on these buttons in my scene view, what I can do is add scripts to them the same way that I've added scripts to this HUD menu item, right? Or HUD hierarchy item. What I'm going to do is click on my menu button. So we're going to add functionality to the menu. And what the menu button is going to do is it's just going to send us to our menu scene. So this should be pretty easy. And the quit button is going to do a similar function. It's just going to close out of the game entirely. Now we won't be able to test the quit button in our editor because we can't quit out of the editor. But know that they're both pretty easy setup. So what I'll do is I'll start with my menu button. I'll select that in my scene or in my hierarchy, and I'll scroll down in in the inspector, and I'm going to add a component. And in this case, I'm going to call it a script machine. And this is going to be embedded as well. So I don't need to make an individual macro for this. I can just change from graph to embed. And now I'll hit edit graph, but it should take me here already. Okay, so I'm going to get rid of my on start and on update functions. I don't need those. And instead, I'm going to hit on button click. And in this case, we can keep this as this because we have the script specifically on our menu button. So when this button is clicked, what do we want to happen? Well, we want to load a scene. We're going to go to our scene manager, and we're going to type in load scene. And we just need a scene name because we know what scene we want to load. If we click on the menu, we want our menu scene to be loaded, right? And I can double check. If I go to my projects and look at my scenes, I see menu is the menu. So I just want to make sure these are spelled exactly the same. Go to script graph and menu. Perfect. So that is our menu button. It's as easy as that. And next, I'm going to go to my quit button, and I'm going to do the same exact thing. So select my quit button, make sure it's selected in the scene view and the hierarchy. Scroll down in my inspector and add component. I'm going to add a new script machine. This is going to be an embedded script machine. So changing it from graph to embedded for the source. And then hit edit graph. Again, I don't need my on start and on update, so I'm going to delete these. I'm going to do an on button click again. Again, since we already are attaching this script to our specific button, we don't need to denote which button we're using. I can use the quit button, but that's a little redundant here. So I can just keep it as this. And from here, what I'm going to do is quit out of my game. So let's type in quit. So we have application quit exit code and application quit. We're just going to use the quit. And if you look down below, like in this little explanation section, it says quits the player application. So I'll hit quit, and that's it. That is it for my quit button. So what we can do is I'm going to hit Control S to save. We'll go into level 1, and we'll play. Okay, so I'm in my scene. I can move left and right. I can jump. Let's see what happens if I press escape. All right, my menu shows up. If I hit escape again, my menu leaves. Now let's see what happens if I jump and press escape. Notice how my player is still kind of in air. If we look at the flag, it's not moving anymore, so our time scale is 0. It has effectively frozen. Now, if I click on the resume button, let's see what it does. All right, it starts me off right where I left off. And now let's hit escape and go to menu. Will it load up our menu scene? It sure will. Now, we don't have this set up just yet, and that's going to be in our next video, but our pause menu is all good to go. So we should be okay. So good luck with this. And as always, let me know if you guys have trouble.